Hello, everyone. If you're watching this, it's time to talk about crafting an outline for your midterm paper. Let's get started. First of all, what is an outline? You've probably run across these before, but it's basically an overview or preview of your paper's contents without being fully written out. Now, there's multiple ways of going about this, so I want to review a few so you can find the one that's most helpful for you. The first one is a classic, right? We might have our title or our overall topic at the top, first subpoint, and then the points that support it beneath it, second subpoint and the points that support it beneath it, all that add up to supporting your main thesis or main point overall. Another way of going about an outline, though, involves kind of a diagramming of sorts. Not everyone thinks so linearly, like in order, the way the last one was, and you might have your thoughts come at you at random. This happens to me as well, where I think of an idea and then I think of another idea and I'm not quite sure how I'm going to relate them yet. You might benefit from an outline like this if that's you. So you can kind of draw little bubbles and connect them as you see fit and have your main topic or idea right in the center there. Another way of going about this is even more squiggly and disorganized, but if it works for you, it works. And that is just to note things that you see, connections that you make, maybe all over the place on a piece of paper, and draw little arrows to connect the dots and that sort of thing. That's also an outline where you're getting all your ideas on the page. Last but not least, some papers are well suited for actually drawing out like a little diagram or comic strip of what you want to do. For this midterm paper, because you're talking about sucking at something and it's involving a story of something you did, this is something that could work for that, where you could sketch out a little story to say, you know, here's my intro, here's what I'm thinking. And if that's you, you're welcome to do that for an outline. Something to keep in mind with outlines is that when you have your thesis statement or your main idea, like we've already talked about, you want it to show up throughout the rest of the paper. So regardless of the type of outline you do, you want everything to come back to supporting that main point or your overall idea for the entire paper. Okay, so we shouldn't just see the main idea once and then the paper's about something else. It all should be supporting this main idea, your main takeaway, your main things learned from this experience of sucking at something. You can think of that thesis as the umbrella over your paper, like we've already talked about, with your supporting paragraphs underneath, and then the evidence for those underneath of those supporting paragraphs. If this is the outline, this exact sort of umbrella diagram that works for you, you're welcome to use it. Let's take a look at an example of what an outline might look like given one of the thesis statements that we visited. So here's a revised thesis. This student wrote, "My pursuit of baking and the resulting suckage has taught me many things, including the ability to laugh at myself and the resilience to withstand criticism in front of others. This has had a positive impact both in and outside the kitchen and is a skill I hope to develop beyond this course." Okay, so this thesis statement, in a way, provides a nice preview of the outline or gives us a hint as a writer as to what we need to include if we are thinking through our paper that should support this main idea. Okay, so if that's our thesis at the top, we're going to need a couple of things based on the rubric and based on following that thesis. We're going to need to know a little bit about our journey to suckage. Like, how did you come to choose this activity? You're going to need some evidence of suckage, like was somebody there commenting on your work? Did somebody tell you it wasn't good? How do you know you weren't very good at this at first? And then a couple of lessons learned. What are you taking away from this experience? Rinaldi always talks about her takeaways, both at the beginning of the chapter and throughout. What did she learn from this experience and how did she apply it to other areas of her life? In order to prove these things, you're going to need evidence, right? You're going to need pieces or examples to show us how you went about this and what you learned and what you took away from it. In these lessons learned, remember you do need a connection to the text, okay? So if you're thinking about your outline for this assignment, what you want to do is make sure that you at least have these 4 components to it, plus your thesis statement, and you might include some tidbits of evidence underneath as well as a couple of places where you can connect it back to the text, okay? If that sort of linear style doesn't work for you, you can of course draw bubbles and connect them this way. The good thing about doing it more visually like this is you can rearrange the order pretty easily. So let's say I want my first part of the paper to be about my journey to suckage after my introduction, the second part about my evidence of suckage, the third part about this first lesson learned and the connection to the text, and the fourth part about the other lesson learned and connection to the text. But let's say I want to revise it and switch the lessons learned. I can do that as simply as, erasing the numbers and redoing them in a new order, okay? So I'm still including all the parts of my thesis in the paper. And if you need to revise your thesis to fit your paper, you can. But you want to give a good outline of these 4 components from the rubric that include it. And that way, when you go to write your paper, you have a draft of it of sorts. Now, it's not written out, but you have this visual draft that says, here's what I need to include, okay? Remember that after you have sketched out your main points, you do need to still include your introduction and conclusion, like we've talked about, okay? So now it is your turn to try out an outline for this paper, and I look forward to seeing them online.